I'm going to call everybody. Okay. So tonight we have a cheery subject. Suffering, the first noble truth. And I think it's quite profound. It will be interesting to go through this. So Barry's going to do the first part. Sir?
I'd like to start with a bow, if you'd care to join me. Maybe apropos of this, I got an email 5 minutes ago that a dear old friend of mine just died. Let me close the door. There are more distractions. Okay. So, yes. In our course, this is the beginning of the section on the Four Noble Truths. This is class 29. And we start with the first noble truth, the truth of suffering.
I feel that Fritzl needs to go.
Please take care of it.
Oh, okay.
Go away. Excuse me. Yeah. I'd like to just briefly go over the Four Noble Truths, where they came from, the circumstances, because there's actually teaching in this story, which I'll go over briefly. To begin with, the man who became known as the person we know as the Buddha was a human, just like us. He became enlightened not by being touched by God or having some special dispensation, but by diligently pursuing a spiritual quest, one that went on for several years with great difficulties and challenges. And eventually he realized that it was time for him to find his own way. Traditionally, after a long night of meditation, he came to a new, fully realized understanding of everything. And a result of that realization is that he transcended suffering completely. His experience of the world, of himself, everything was transformed. And then he spent some days after that alone in the forest. I imagine that he had just had his mind completely blown and was having to come to terms with it. It is said that he didn't think it was possible to convey this experience. But sometime later, when he encountered some of his fellow spiritual seekers that he had been traveling with, they asked for a teaching, and eventually he delivered one. And that teaching is the Four Noble Truths. Now, the reason I recap this is that there's important points in here. The fact that the Buddha was a guy. He was a human. We're humans. There's an implication there that liberation is possible. The fact that it didn't come easy. It took effort and discipline over a long period of time. And that in the end, he achieved enlightenment. He made that change from whatever intellectual understanding he had gathered along the way and through the various practices that he did. What finally turned on the lights, so to speak, was meditation. So, these Four Noble Truths are not they're not a description of enlightenment or some secret knowledge. They're a teaching. They're a guide that we can use to find our own way to enlightenment. And they begin with the first truth, the truth of suffering. Now, this first chapter that we're presented with, I feel is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to spend too much time with it. It is basically describing what we mean by suffering, and also the way that our suffering gives rise to the suffering of others. And this is an important point. It seems that we're generous with our suffering. In fact, the suffering, the angst, the anxiety, the discontent that we create and nurture within ourselves is the great source of suffering in all of humanity. Now, it is therefore important to understand the meaning of suffering and to see the truth of that in our own experience, to examine the experience of suffering and to see it, to see the anxiety that drives us. To free ourselves, it is necessary to see our suffering, to understand it, and to meet it fully. Now, first of all, it seems that we mostly experience life as a struggle. Why? Trungpa says, we struggle because in our being we feel that we are what we are and we cannot change. You see, we think that our experience is just the way it is, that it's reality, that our experience is the result of our circumstances, that we cannot change how events affect us. So we try to change our circumstances in a way that we imagine will lead to our having a pleasant experience of life. We seek pleasure. And again, any relief we find is temporary, but we try again. So it's important to point out here that we're not talking about ignoring our circumstances. We all need to take care of business, and that hard work may be involved in that. But hard work is not the same as struggle. Struggle is like Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the mountain and never quite getting there. You see, for eternity, trying to get to the top of the mountain, trying to get to happiness, that's us seeking happiness. And we blame our circumstances, we blame ourselves for not doing better, and along with that self-doubt comes resentment. It ain't fair. He says, there is no relief or relaxation when we are in the samsaric world. There is always some kind of struggle going on. That struggle is always trying to get our circumstances to be just right. We're evaluating everything, deciding what we need to possess, what to draw to us, what to avoid or destroy, or what we can just ignore. Sound familiar? It's the three poisons: passion, aggression, and ignorance. And that's what we're doing. Things are never quite right. And even if they are, we know that things may change, probably will. In fact, they always do. So as long as that is our approach, there is no end to struggle. And all of this is from the point of view of the self looking out, always judging how that will affect me. And in the reading he says, we find that the more into ourselves we are, the more we suffer. And the less into ourselves we are, the less we suffer. And this struggle, this chronic dissatisfaction, anxiety, this is samsara. And it is the First Noble Truth. The First Noble Truth is simply a statement that this suffering is something that is always there to varying degrees, and that our response is usually to seek pleasure or comfort. Yeah, he says that search for pleasure is the illogic or the bad logic of samsaric existence. It's that logic that we can find happiness by buying a new car, finding a new mate, or moving to a new job, or a new home, or a new country, or whatever. We are always looking over the fence and seeing greener pastures over there. We're saying to ourselves, my life is lacking, that I am lacking. So, he says, regarding pleasure from the point of view of pain is a kind of animal instinct. It is the instinct of the lower realms of existence within the human situation. So, because we experience the world from our samsaric viewpoint, we can't really see it. We're always seeing it through this filter, through this. And we can't really see the truth of our own suffering and pain. We're unwilling to see it, to acknowledge our suffering, because of what we think it says about ourselves, because we believe we can't change. So, as he says, unless we realize the facts of life, we cannot begin to practice the Dharma. And it's time to face the facts. The fact that, as he says, basic anxiety is taking place in your everyday life all of the time. It's sometimes very subtle, like background noise or wallpaper, but it's there, and it influences us. It can be like gravity that pulls us off course. But by seeing our pain, our suffering, not turning away from it, we begin to understand our situation. This is where we are, in samsara. Then things can start to become workable. We may begin to see the possibility of escaping samsara, the possibility of liberation. So, how do we work with the situation? Now what? I love this quote from the reading. He says, to begin with, you could give up your scheme of what you ideally want in your life. This is kind of an odd thing, but because we're putting all this effort into practice and study the Buddha Dharma, that's a good thing. But if we're doing this as a way of achieving some state, if we're doing this to seek pleasure or relief, then it's all about me. He goes on to say, in turn, you could try to be kind to others, or at least stop inconveniencing others. So, the main point of the First Noble Truth, as he says, is to realize that you do have such anxiousness in your being. Look into that. You can actually see your suffering, your anxiety, like you can see your thoughts during meditation. He says at this point, however, we are not talking about an antidote or how to overcome that anxiety. The first thing is to just see that you are anxious. And this gives you a reference point, a kind of a place to start from. And to work with that reference point, in fact, to really find that reference point, you have to tame your mind. How? Meditation. And that taming the mind is something that goes on and on in one form or another all along this path. The mind is kind of like a garden. If you let it go on its own for too long, weeds start to take over. So the Buddha Dharma is a path that has been carefully laid out for us. And there's real value in using this guidance, starting at the beginning, here in the Hinayana. This is very nuts and bolts at this stage. And of course, this starts with the First Noble Truth. He says, in practicing Buddha Dharma, you cannot bypass anything. You have to begin with the Hinayana and the First Noble Truth. Having done so, the Mahayana and Vajrayana will come along naturally. It's like a journey where new understandings come into view. And it's worth pointing out that also that it is a personal journey. That each of us has come to the Dharma from their own particular causes and conditions, that brought us here. And we all set out on this path with our own individual stories of who we are, the strategies we use for navigating life, our own habitual patterns of response and thought. So we're each finding our own way. The teachings point the way. They give us understanding of the experiences we encounter along the way, but each of us has to find our own way in the company of fellow practitioners. Trying to find a shortcut is not time well spent. Like the Buddha, we have to work it out, step by step. At the end, he says, the reality is that we are all trapped in samsaric neurosis, everybody, without exception. It is the way that you work with reality, it is best that you work with reality rather than with ideals. That's it. Oops, you're muted, John.
Thank you for telling me to unmute. And that was great. I'm going to pick up and sort of reiterate a few of the key points. One is that this anxiety, the wish that things were better or not so bad, the wish that things were different in one way or the other, either they're better or they're not as bad as they are, permeates our lives. I mean, from the minute we wake up in the morning to going to sleep at night, they're micro moments of these little teeny anxieties. What'll I have for dinner? Should I get up now? Oh, my leg hurts. Oh, I wish I, whatever it might be, these little moments of wishing things were different just permeate our lives. And really what we're being exhorted to do here is to become aware of that, to see it through the medium of meditation practice, shamatha practice. When one practices shamatha, there are the three main benefits, which I've repeated again, but I will again. And the first one is that you become aware of how much you're thinking. Because normally we're so lost in the dream of self-improvement As we walk down the street, do I like this day? I wish it were a little nicer. Maybe it's going to rain. Oh, I hope it doesn't rain. Whatever it might be. How am I dressed today? Oh, well, it's pretty good today. It's better than it was yesterday, but it won't stay that way. All kinds of things. Micro movements of the mind, constantly taking where we are and wishing it were somehow different. It's our lives, our minds are riddled with it. At least mine is. And really, what we're being exhorted to do is to realize that, because when we do it, when we constantly do it, so much of the time, we are asleep. We are dreaming. We don't even realize that we're doing it. We're not fully here. We're lost in this little moment of wishing things were different, or of hoping things will be different, or of trying to make things to be different. You get in your car and you're driving and you're thinking, how well am I driving? Am I driving well enough? Oh, I should be driving better. Oh, I should be aware of this. I should be aware of that. That person in front of me, he stopped too soon. I had to jam on my brakes. Oh, this terrible driver. And on and on and on, where these moments of criticism, of wishing things were different, instead of simply seeing and dealing with our lives. And this is really the essence of suffering, that we're constantly caught in this anxiety of wanting things to be different. And then the other part of the essence of that suffering is that we're lost in it. We don't even notice that we're doing it. It's so much a part of us. It has become such a habit that permeates our days, our minds, our minutes, our seconds. And we're being asked to awaken from that. The second benefit of shamatha meditation is that we begin to develop the ability to wake ourselves up and see what is actually happening in the present moment, to come back. And the third benefit is that by doing all this, we get a rest. Not only do we get a rest, but to the extent that we stop wishing things were otherwise, we become much more available to the world around us, much more of benefit, much more able to practice genuine kindness and communication, rather than a preconceived idea of kindness, of goodness, of generosity. We begin to actually come present to the world. And in doing that, we get a rest, and we achieve what is called the twofold benefit of helping ourselves and others. We stop doing harm to others. Every moment we come present. When we're lost in that anxiety, we are always either doing harm or about to do harm. Because when we impose our imagined idea of how things could be better, it does a violence to the world, large or small. It does a violence to the world around us and the people with whom we're interacting, large or small. It could be micro, and it could be quite dramatic. All these different ways. I mean, what's for dinner? I think I'll have this. No, I think I'll have that. Maybe I'm tasting this. Oh, I shouldn't eat so much. I should put some back. And we're constantly involved in self-criticism. We sit, we wipe our bums on the toilet, and we're critical of the way we do that. How well did I wipe myself today? Am I clean? It goes on and on. every little moment. You're in the shower, you're thinking, am I soaping up? Well, yes, this is nice. And when you say this is nice, this is good, you're comparing it in your mind to what it would be like if it wasn't that way. And there's anxiety in that. So even when we're involved in pleasure, when things are good, we're comparing it to what it would be like if they were bad. However subtly, all these things often, they can be major, they can involve just micro movements of our minds. And there is the possibility of stepping out of that world of micro control by one's mind, one's thoughts, one's anxiety. It starts with shamatha meditation. That's the beginning. That's how we step on the path. And we begin to do two things. We begin, one, to see this. We can see it in our minds in moments. And then we get lost in it again. And then you realize, oh, I've been asleep. I've been dreaming again. And you come back and you can see it. And to the extent that we see it, we begin to cease to do it. We are beginning to identify the gaps in that thinking, anxious, anxiety-ridden, constantly comparing mind. It's really quite shocking when we begin to actually take a look at how much we're doing this and how subtle it is. By subtle, I mean they're just teeny little micro movements that we don't even notice most of the time. They're big ones, of course, and those are can be dramatic and quite noticeable. But then there are the tiny little ones as we move through our day. Do I like the way I put my sock on? Do I like the way my shoe fits? Oh, my shoe's dirty. On and on and on. Constantly criticizing, wishing things were better. And he makes the point that even when things are really good, they are good and we're enjoying them in contrast to that memory we have of they could be worse. So he gives the example of someone who comes into $1 million. That was a lot of money back when he was giving these talks. It's less today, huh? And he gives the example of someone who comes into $1 million and is just loving it. And in comparison to what it was like before, when they didn't have the $1 million, or what it would be like if they were to lose it. So I think that of these three chapters, this is the most important message, is that we're being exhorted, recommended, to see all of this happening in our minds. Just see it. Until we see it, we have no option because we are asleep at the wheel. But once we see it, the path begins to unfold. And it's very difficult because we have such a habit of going to sleep, of going back into dream. It's habitual. And when we do that, we are bound by karma. Karma means that we're lost in the dream. We're lost in the dream of self-improvement, of anxiety, which means self-improvement. We're lost in the dream of trying to make it better and avoid having it become worse. And it runs our days subtly, sometimes grossly. But even when we're not involved in gross examples of it, we are involved in these little micro ones. As we get up in the morning, we go through our toilet, we come downstairs, we make our breakfast. It's just riddled with these little judgments. So then in the last chapter, he goes through all the different ways and kinds of suffering. And he talks about the Four Noble Truths. He starts out by talking about how the first two are really about suffering, and the last two are about release from suffering. So the first two are about dukkha, which is the Sanskrit for suffering, duknel in Tibetan. And the last two are about nirvana. So the first one is the truth of suffering, and that suffering has an origin. That's the second noble truth. And if we can see the origin, which is these little micro moments of them arising, and there's more to it than that, then we have the possibility of experiencing the absence of suffering, which is the third noble truth, that there is such a thing. It's the cessation. And then the fourth noble truth is the path. So each one of these pairs is divided up into result and cause. The suffering is the first noble truth, it's the result. The second noble truth is the origin of suffering, that's the cause. The third noble truth is the cessation of suffering, that's the result. The fourth noble truth is the path leading to the cessation of suffering, that's the cause. Barry said, the Buddha taught these to his four companions. They had practiced austerities together. In those days, if you wanted to achieve release from suffering, the standard path, or one of the standard paths, was to go and become a yogi and a renunciate and ascetic. And of course, the Buddha did all that. And just before he achieved enlightenment, he decided this wasn't working. And a young girl offered him milk and honey, and he took it. And this was a violation of the type of behavior he was supposed to be engaging in, the asceticism. He was emaciated, and you can see statues of him as an emaciated yogi. And then he drank milk and honey, and he began to put on weight, I guess. And he went and sat under the Bodhi tree in what is now Bodh Gaya, and sat through the 4 watches of the night. And in the last watch, he achieved enlightenment. And during those watches, what came to him? The 4 maras. The 4 maras are temptations. And I forget all of them, but one of them is sensual pleasures, another is food and drink, another is spiritual attainment, and I forget the 4th, having to do with pride, I think. These maras, and they all have to do with, guess what? Self-improvement, bettering the situation, offering him a possibility of a better way to be. And he rejected all of them. He saw them clearly, rejected them, and in rejecting them, he achieved enlightenment in his complete peace of mind and his complete awareness of mind, beyond the habit of these temptations, which are plaguing us all the time. We get up and the maras are there, telling us, what should I wear today? I think I would look better in this than in that. I think if I put on that, though, then I'll get this kind of reaction. And we go on, and we're lost. So he achieved enlightenment, and as Barry said, he felt that he couldn't possibly communicate it. It was beyond words. And so he wandered for 40 days. Sounds like Jesus. And he wandered, and eventually he ran into these 4 friends with whom he'd practiced austerities. And at first they thought that he'd fallen from the path, and they sort of rejected him. And then they took a second look, and they saw that something was different. So they asked him to explain himself and to give them teaching. And they sat down together in a place called, what is now called Varanasi, outside of Varanasi, in Sarnath. So just outside of Varanasi, India, in a grove called the Jeta Grove. And I'm sorry, it's not the Jeta Grove. It was in a grove. And he sat down and gave them teachings. Today, if you go there, there's a huge stupa commemorating the event. and you can circumambulate it. A stupa is a monument. Originally, the first stupas were built to house relics of the Buddha's body. They were holy. And it might be a little piece of bone or fingernail or whatever it might be. And they housed these relics and people would worship them. Eventually, stupas proliferated so much, they no longer held relics of the Buddha's body. And in fact, Chinese pagodas are stupas, actually. And so, and same in Japan, when you see a pagoda-like structure, it's a stupa and regarded as being a holy representation of the Buddha. And you can go there today and circumambulate the first stupa. It's very big, a couple 100 feet high. So there is an elaboration the Buddha gave of the different kinds of suffering. And Trungpa Rinpoche says this torturing process we impose on ourselves, and remember, it can be just micro, tiny little thing, is a habitual pattern. It's somewhat dependent on or produced by our previous lives. And at the same time, we both sustain that process and so further karmic seeds. So because you see that all of these thoughts, because they're unconscious, semi-conscious, because we don't really realize that we're having them, they carry us away and put us into action, changing our clothes, changing our diet, saying something to someone, whatever it might be. It can be tiny, it can be huge. And this is karma. Karma is these dreams which wrap us up in the attempt to avoid, to resolve our anxieties over and over again, and cause us to commit acts of violence to the world. Because when we try to mitigate or dissolve our own anxiety, it is at the expense of others. We're no longer acting appropriately to a situation. We're acting out of our own particular egotistical, ego-centered, I-centered dream. So there are 8 types of suffering. The first 4 are called inherited suffering. And these are birth, old age, sickness, and death. And birth, of course, you can take it, it's the literal birth. You know, the birth is infancy. You come down the birth canal and the baby comes out screaming. They were sort of bathing in this warm fluid in the womb. And then suddenly they're forced down this narrow channel, pulled out into the harsh air. And it's very unpleasant. But this is a process that we go through all the time because we create little wombs for ourselves of all kinds. A relationship womb, our physical womb, our house. It might be our clothes, our self-image of who we think we are. There are all kinds of ways that we do this. And sooner or later, we exit that womb. We have to come out of it. We thought we were going to be very rich and we're going to make a lot of money. And we did. And we were in this womb of wealth. And then things changed. Maybe we lost the money, or maybe it paled and it no longer provided the kind of happiness and satisfaction that it had previously. Or maybe other people resented us for it and we began to feel pain about that. Things change. We're constantly creating wombs for ourselves and leaving them, being forced to leave them. You don't want to leave because the womb is warm, cozy, comfortable. And this is the idea of birth. We go through it over and over again through the process of karma. Karma takes us through it. Remember, karma are the stories that we're telling ourselves about self-improvement, about our anxieties, and we're being impelled by them. And we're being impelled to change things. And so our karma forces us out of the womb, just as it does an infant out of its mother's womb. And it forces us out of the wombs that we have made and into a new, harsher reality until we make peace with that and it becomes a new womb of sorts. And then once again, we're forced out. Old age. Old age is another birth. We're being born from our youth and our health, which we hardly appreciated. It was just the way it was, right? Just like, I mean, a baby isn't sitting in the womb thinking, wow, this is really great. They're just comfortable. And we, in our youth, don't really appreciate it that much until we begin to lose it. Until we begin to look in the mirror and see the signs of the aging and the fact that we're no longer young and beautiful, until our bodies start to fall apart with disease, with infirmities of all kinds. And we lose abilities. We begin to decay. He says, your tongue is numb, your eyes are dull, your hearing is weak. Oh yes, that's a hearing aid. And each one of us has these things or will have them inevitably if we live long enough as this body wears out. He says, aging is unpleasant. We have collected so much in our lives that we're like chimneys, thick with soot. He's talking about the psychology of it. So old age is a huge form of suffering. And again, it's the same thing. We look at it, our situation, and we say, I don't want this. I wish it were otherwise. Anxiety riddles us. Then the third of these four, inherited, we inherit them because it's our karma. We were born and now we're going to go through this, a sickness. And you resent the illness, the threat that it entails, the threat to your well-being, the discomfort, the inconvenience that you've got your entertainment, your activities interrupted, whatever it might be, by this illness, and the real threat that it offers. It can, if it's serious, the threat to your continued existence. And it's based on, he says, this fear of sickness is based on the occasional panic that something might be terribly wrong with you or that you might die. And we have people in our lives for whom this is more powerful than others. And the fourth one is death itself. Not having any opportunity to continue further. You're stopped in your tracks when you die. You have to leave everything. I remember him giving a seminar on death at what's now Shambhala Mountain Center outside of Fort Collins, Colorado. And in it, he said, you think that losing a loved one is painful. You think that losing a limb is painful. He said, you think that losing your money is painful. He said, when you die, you lose the whole world. That's painful. What an amazing revelation. So you're leaving everything that you want, that you've possessed, everything you've hung on to, including your habitual patterns, and you might not even encounter the Dharma again. We all hope, those of us who are practitioners, that when we die, we'll wind up in a better place to practice the Dharma. That's the ideal. They call it going to a heaven, like a Sukhavati. A Sukhavati means a realm of bliss. And there are some practices that you can do to eject your consciousness as you die out of your dying body and into a Sukhavati. And what a Sukhavati is a pleasant place which is very, very conducive to practicing the Dharma. But there are no guarantees. You may not even remember. It may all just evaporate. So death is the leaving of everything that you could possibly want. And again, there's this anxiety. I don't want it. I wish that it were otherwise. We have many deaths in our lives, all kinds of deaths. The movie ends. It's a little mini death. Oh, I wish it hadn't ended. You know, I was enjoying it so much. That's a teeny mini death. Or we have a great dinner and we sit down, and by the time we get to the end, we're stuffed and we don't want to eat anymore. There's the death of that pleasure of the dinner. There's the death of a relationship. You fall in love with somebody, or you fall into friendship with somebody, and then it ends, and there's a death. There are constant deaths, and they involve loss and the wish that things were otherwise, the wish that things were different. In business and love, vacations, entertainments, all kinds of deaths. And then there are the last three of the major sufferings. There are the suffering of the period between birth and death, which means during our lives. And again, it's the same thing. We're never satisfied. We always want more or less, depending. The first of these is coming across what is not desirable. It's foisted upon us. Something we didn't want. Might be disease. Might be some circumstance in our lives that we're lonely. We lose our partner. All kinds of things. Lose our health. We come across what is not desirable. Poverty, illness, loneliness. And we wish it were otherwise. We think naively that we can avoid meeting ugly or undesirable situations. But we find we cannot avoid things we don't like. This is him saying. Different people experience this in different degrees. Some are quite successful at avoiding the unpleasant for a while. And then, when they can't, oftentimes, what do? We blame other people for it and freak out when we can't avoid the unpleasant, what is not desirable. Not being able to hold on to what is desirable. All kinds of things, right? Our youth, our health. We were very different when we were young, those of us who are old. And where did it go? All those hours spent enjoying one kind of youthful activity or another, they're dreams now, memories, which have no more value than last night's dream. And we can become involved with resentment, sourness, disaffection, bitterness, that we weren't able to hold on to what we had and wanted. And we probably didn't even really appreciate it that much when we had it. Now that we've lost it, it becomes an icon of desirability. And we could be bitter and sorrowful that we have lost whatever it might be, our youth, our beauty, our friendship, our love, our money, our health, the pleasure of that event, whatever it might be. And then finally, the last of these three is not getting what you do want. Our dreams are unrealized. And even if you do get what you want, it pales when you realize there's something else you want too. And you thought you really wanted this thing and you pursued it, and then you got it, and suddenly you're on to the next thing. I mean, it's just like kids at Christmas, remember? You know, the Christmas tree. I don't know if, for those of you who had Christmas trees. And you go in and, oh, it's fantastic. And there are all these great toys and you're a little kid and you're so delighted and you're opening the presents. And where are those presents 6 months later? Moldering in a closet, under a bed, in the garbage. So even when we get what we want, it doesn't really last. And then finally, there's general misery, the general misery of all pervasive suffering, it's called. And this is really connected to the fact that as long as we believe that we have an individual existence, that there is this I that endures over time, unchanging, always there, then we are constantly engaged in the act of self-aggrandizement, self-protection, self-betterment, self-preservation. Because every opportunity, every new situation is another opportunity for us to suffer. And we don't want that to happen. The worst suffering of all, the ultimate, is the threat of death itself. And so the very belief in my personal existence is underlaid by the fear of the lack of the death of that individual existence, and it permeates our lives as we walk down the streets of our lives. We are constantly being affected by this desire to bolster our existence, protect it, not have it slip away. And he says of this, you can't fully relax in the present without thinking about the past and the future. Just try it. We can for a minute, and then sooner or later we watch our minds and they're going into the past and the future. I wish that hadn't happened. I hope this will happen. I'm worried that that will happen. Whatever it might be. He says we can't experience just one thing without having some contrast to it. That is, what would happen if it weren't here? What would happen if it were better? On and on. The flickering of thoughts, constant movement, constant changing. In fact, even in the feelings of pleasure, an element of pain still exists. When we feel pleasure, we're feeling it might not last. It's going to end. Supposedly, this general misery can only be perceived clearly by enlightened people. Why? Because they no longer believe in a self. They're no longer immersed in that, buried in that, the way we are. And finally, we have these three patterns of suffering. The first is the suffering of suffering. It just keeps piling up. You get old, then you get sick, then you lose your money, then your spouse dies or leaves you or whatever. It just keeps piling and piling and piling. And then there's the all-pervasive suffering, which is the same as the one we just described, this general misery, which just has to do with feeling that I, and my existence is questionable. And then finally, there's the suffering of change, that you can't hold on to what you want to hold on to. You can't hold on to what is desirable, and it leaves. Constant change. Things get worse. Then they get better, then they get worse. And when they get better even, then there's still that background of suffering because they've gotten better in contrast to the unhappiness. And you have to have that unhappiness there in order to appreciate the betterment. So these three sufferings, the suffering of suffering, that it just keeps piling up. The suffering of change, that what you thought you had that was good leaves. And then the all-pervasive suffering, which just riddles us because we are constantly afraid for our continued well-being and existence. So he says, even at the highest level of pleasure, there is always a tinge of pain. Sanity brings less pain. By sanity, I mean coming present, shamatha meditation, shamatha vipassana meditation. It always involves coming present. And in coming present, we stop looking for something better, stop being afraid of something worse. And finally, he says, you could say, sit and practice. Then you will be out of your misery. It is not exactly a promise or something you have up your sleeve, but it is true.
Brooke Lewis.
Sorry. It's very simple. He says, a person can experience birth without pain, old age without pain, sickness without pain, and death without pain. It's possible. And really, this is what enlightened mind accomplishes, among other things. Finally, I'll close with this quote. We can actually declare that as non-theistic Buddhists, we can free the whole world from pain. That's the greatest news, and we are going to do it properly, rather than by worshiping someone or going into a trance. Worshiping someone, that's the theistic thing, and going into a trance is the whole sort of yogic thing of achieving pleasure through focusing one's mind in a trance-like way upon an object. So we could have a discussion. The night is young.
Hi, John.
Hi, Fred.
I love the comment about dog shit, about like waking, like, I forget the exact quote, but I used it today in a conversation with someone. I was teaching someone about shamatha without teaching them about shamatha. They're like, hey, I keep caught up in, is this the right thing to think about or not the right thing to think about? I'm like, you could just wake up and walk down the street and see, make sure you're not stepping in dog shit. That's, and she was like, oh my God, it never entered her mind. These teachings are so powerful.
Indeed. Thank you. Who else?
Oh, come on, there must be some suffering out there.
Yeah.
Judy's.
Yeah. I'm wondering about the trance thing that you were just mentioning.
Mm.
I came at meditation through yoga, and I'm wondering whether when I'm focusing on, whatever the corner of the molding or whatever, whether I am trancing, even though my eyes are open. I'm questioning whether it's the same as when I was in college and could sleep with my eyes open during a lecture. How do you tell?
It's a matter of degree. In the tradition, you see, shamatha does lead eventually, in its furthest extension, development, to trance states. These are samsara, suffering, confusion. is divided into three parts. There's the realm of desire called the Kama Dhatu. Kama means like Kama Sutra, maybe you've heard. Kama Dhatu, Dhatu means space or realm. There is the Rupa Dhatu, which is the realm of pure form. And there is the Arupa Dhatu, which is the formless realm. Now in the Kama Dhatu is just where we live. This comprises the 6 realms: gods, jealous gods, humans, animals, hungry ghosts, and hell beings. They comprise the Kama Dhatu. Now, if you practice shamatha and take it to its what we would call it, its logical or its inevitable extension, you will wind up in the other 2 realms, the Rupa Dhatu and the Arupa Dhatu, because these are the realms of pure mentation. They are pure trance states. You see, you're focusing your mind on one-pointedly on an object, the breath. Now,
Yeah.
you're not going to wind up in a trance state because the breath, one of the virtues of the breath is that it comes and goes. It's moving, you know? And that movement will break up your trance. It takes a lot of work to get into the trance states of the Rupa Dhatu, the realm of pure form, and the Arupa Dhatu. A lot of work, tremendous amounts of meditation in solitary. And these are they're said to be very pleasurable states, the trance states. There are 4 different trance states in the realm of pure form, and there are 4 in the formless realm. And they're very pleasurable. You can stay in them for long periods of time, and they're totally dangerous because eventually, like anything else that's created, it will come apart. It will fall apart, and you will fall out of the trance state. It's kind of like going to the gym. You build up big muscles for a while, and then you stop working out and they disappear. Same thing with the trance states. But you really don't have much to worry about practicing shamatha. There is so much, you've got so much going on in your mind, the fact that we're working with the breath, it's really a helpful and useful stage on the path. But then we combine it with vipassana, awareness practice. And there it gets very difficult to treat that as an approach into trance, because we're opening our mind to what's going on in the environment, everything and anything. Awareness.
But- Yeah.
You really can't develop the trance states in that way, if you're practicing any kind of vipassana awareness practice.
I'm still confused.
You're confused. Don't worry about it. If you practice shamatha and shamatha vipassana, especially going out with the breath, you've got nothing to worry about with trance states. Now, you could say that the moment that you're sort of fixed on the breath, that's kind of like a mini trance. But the thing is this, you're working with vipassana, awareness of the environment. You could treat that as an object, the environment. And then that becomes a kind of concentration practice. But the problem is that the environment is constantly changing and moving. And so it will wake you up from that trance. It'll make you be responsive to it as you walk down the street, as you greet your friend, shake their hand. And it constantly, it destroys trance. Trance requires complete unmoving solidity. And if you were in a trance, people could call your name, you wouldn't hear them.
Ah,
Yeah, you're
I
gone.
hear them.
Huh?
I hear them.
Yeah, it's like a narcotic. It's like a drug. You're gone. And they take long, long
like
periods
that.
of time to cultivate. Huh?
It feels like that sometimes.
Sometimes you don't have to worry about it. It's there, but the way we're practicing, it ain't gonna happen.
Okay.
I just like to, can I add one little thing here?
Yeah.
That what I heard you say, Judy, was you talked about focusing on that little corner, that, the gaze, the focus is a soft focus, right? There's not supposed to be any intensity there. You're resting your gaze lightly. It's a soft focus. And in that way, there can be more open awareness. That's all. Christy, I think, had a question. What's that?
Yeah, Christy, I think it was next, and then Tony.
So I rose my hand up and then I took it down because today was kind of a crazy day for me because I resigned from my job.
Oh my gosh.
And I know. And it's a job I've held for like 15 years, and I felt this, I mean, I don't know, it's been just a whirlwind of things, but I guess my question was like, should we even try to like better ourselves? And then in saying that thing, I realized how much the I exists so much for me, just even in that question, just like, because then just by saying, should I even try to, I mean, because I resigned really just because it in a desire to just relieve just how just the pace and the just the amount of work that has just been feeling like more and more as the older I get and just kind of becoming insurmountable. And so it's interesting for me. I'm just asking a question, Frankie. It's just interesting for me to to say that question, to want to have to ask that question. Should I even try to better my situation? And then I just realized how much I exists in that very question. So I don't know.
And you don't be hard on yourself. That's another form of self, criticism. Just see it. This is what we're being exhorted to do, instructed to do, is to see it, practice awareness, realize what's going on in your mind. And then you live your life in the most intelligent, common sense way you can. And give up self-criticism, to the extent of beating yourself up.
Yeah. I felt the detachment and kind of I love my work so much, but I felt like I was kind of able to move through it today just because of just a little more space there, and a little more, there was a calm, it wasn't like as much electricity that generally goes on in my brain with these kinds of things. So I don't know. I'm not sure what that means or doesn't mean, but it's just the I is I'm just seeing it kind of come and seeing it go and seeing it loosen. I'm seeing it loosen, but it's there.
Every time you see it without judgment, see it clearly, it dissolves by itself. What keeps it alive is constant criticism, the constant anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
That's what feeds ego. Ego is that anxiety, that constant wish that things were otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the I lives. And when you just see things clearly, including the I, it's gone.
Do you think it's more difficult for people in more trying circumstances? I mean, there's definitely more trying circumstances than not. Is the I more ingrained in that, in that? I mean, I'm just thinking about people in Syria, with bombs going off and no sense of peace or no sense of, I wonder if it's more difficult or if the I becomes more just ingrained in feeling this sense of having a more difficult situation. I guess that's an identity there.
Yes, I agree. I think it is more difficult because I is the fundamental feeling of discomfort, of unsureness, of fear for one's personal existence. That's what drives I, is
Yeah.
the constant attempt to solidify one's existence. And to the extent that the threat to one's existence is more or less real, I becomes more or less exercised. And the trick is always for each one of us to just see it.
Sorry, things get frozen sometimes.
Okay.
Anyways, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Meg has a question. I don't know who else.
Tony did.
I'll
Okay.
go, Tony. I'll go after Tony.
Who's next?
Tony.
Okay.
Oh, thanks, John. So I have another, there's a word that I didn't see here, but I responded a lot to these writings, and the word is expectation. And I have another path that teaches me that an expectation is a premeditated resentment in many ways. I've come to learn that's the truth, you know, of many situations. And the anxiety, there's something written on page 384 here that I'm not struggling with, but I'd like you, if you could, to just flesh it out a little bit for me. It's my understanding that with these chapters that I read, that anxiety basically produces karma. And as I've come to understand also, anxiety is about the future and depression is about the past. So the sentence here is, we try to produce continuity. That is what is known as karma or volitional action. And from volitional action arises suffering. So is he really meaning here that volitional action is that we're trying to flesh the story out, like there's a thought comes before the thought that we're having, or an action before the action that we're having? Is that what it means? I just am a little unclear of what he actually means in that sentence.
Yeah. I think you've got it. He means that we have a judgment about the situation. This is going to be good for me. This is going to be bad for me. And based on that constant involvement in those judgments, we're involved in an ongoing attempt to resolve them in a way that is good for me, good for I, that brings pleasure and security and happiness and avoids the imagined unhappiness, displeasure, and threat. And so we're engaged in this ongoing, continuous story, really. It's a drama. Small, perhaps, or big. It can be a huge drama, you know, involving my marriage, my life, my career. It can be very small, involving what a friend thinks of me, you know, what I'm going to have for dinner, you know, what I think about my car. Who knows? It can be tiny. But they involve.
It's fascinating how, if you look at the bigger picture of our society, it's almost as if the structure of our education system and the structure of our entertainment and the structure of the life as we know it and embrace is really, it generates low self-esteem. It basically produces the sorts of things that he's dealing with here.
Be confessional. Tonight, I said to Val, I'm nervous about this talk, you know, tonight, the class. And she said, oh, are you anxious?
Remember, it's just a pretty word for fear, John.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
And it's that same thing again. You imagine what's going to happen and you say, no, I don't want that. I want this, right? And we're lost in this dream that carries us forward as though we're on roller skates, pulling us, moving us. It has this momentum.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Big?
Oh, that was good, though. I lost my question.
You lost your question. Well, we have Jane, and we have Robert, and we have Mary.
Okay.
How about Mary?
Yeah, hi. I had a few questions, but I'll just get to one. When you say just see it, who or what is seeing? It's my eye again. I'm sorry, but who or what is seeing when you, because it has to be a subject, doesn't it, that sees?
No.
No. Okay. So
Doesn't.
what is seeing? Just awareness?
Yes. The awareness that right now you're looking at your computer screen and
Right.
you can't control the fact that you're aware of it and you're aware of this image speaking to you. It's just happening automatically, beyond your volition.
Right.
It's that kind of, it's exactly that. And you see, this is the foundation. Actually, I wish I had it here. He said it here and somewhere in here. It's this terrific quote about this, that that basically there is constant awareness going on, but it is punctuated by thoughts of intentionality. Thoughts like, I want to make this better. I want to get rid of that, whatever it might be. And those thoughts, or you say, I'm going to focus on this. But meanwhile, awareness is going on nonstop all the time. You can't shut it off.
Right. I understand that. It's unchanging and it's always there. But I guess I always feel there has to be a person to experience the awareness. Right?
No, that's a secondary thought. The awareness is here first, and then we make a comment. Oh, I'm aware.
Right.
It's not necessary.
Not necessary.
It's an unnecessary second thought.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
That doesn't mean you can't do it. Maybe it's useful, maybe it's a work of art. But the fact is that awareness is primary. It's always there. It is the foundation of all of this.
Yeah. I guess I get hung up in, I can't be aware unless the I is there. That's where I get hung up on that. But okay, I'm working on it though. I'm working on it.
Yeah, but it's okay. I mean, we're on the path.
Yeah.
And I says I'm on the path.
I am definitely on the path. Yeah.
But the thing is that what happens is that every time we come present in awareness, I dissolves. I dissolves, because if it's still there, it obscures our vision.
It filters it. You're saying it filters the vision.
It's like
self. It becomes self again, right? You're involving the self.
It's in the way.
It's in the way.
So every time we come present, the I dissolves. So the I makes that gesture of saying, "Oh, I want to come present," and then it has to get out of the way.
Okay. Right.
It does.
And if it's out of the way, then it becomes a much more peaceful, neutral existence, so to speak.
Absolutely. And this is the higher stages of the path all involve resting in this ongoing, lucid, pellucid awareness that never stops. It is utterly continuous, and it never stops, even in death.
Right.
Even in the death of the body, the awareness goes on. In fact, that's what the word tantra means. When they talk about tantra, tantra literally means continuity. And what it's talking about is the continuity of awareness beyond,
Awareness.
beyond I and other.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
We're almost out of time here.
That's good. We had a few more questions. I know Jane did, and there was a third person,
Robert,
Robert. We'll do that. Jane?
2 points. One, which I really didn't hear before for whatever reason, is how is the milk and honey thing a metaphor for needing someone or something that gives you, that nurtures you, that enables you to get past the suffering. It's like an intervention. And it happens to be milk and honey, something nurturing and sweet and makes you whole again. So that's one question I have, if the, you know, the meaning of that metaphorically or symbolically, you know, rather than literally, you know, someone gives you the milk and honey and you said, you know, great, and all of a sudden you're sitting under the tree and everything's changed. So that's one thing. Then, as we've spoken about before, I have a lot of trouble with this suffering thing, especially the aging, because I think if we went around the Zoom room, I would question if anyone here would want to be 13 again. That is a time of enormous suffering, and it's a stage we don't want to go through. And is it not also possible that with aging, through the suffering, through living the life, whatever the life is or has been, we gain wisdom, we gain learning, we gain acceptance, we gain okayness, we gain generosity. We don't need what we needed to fill ourselves to feed that ego. We can truly let go of it more than we can when we're younger. So aging in one way is not so terrible.
Okay.
I guess I have trouble with this categorical absolute. It's the 8 stages, it's the suffering, it's just so categorical.
I think it comes to each one of us in different ways. Some people have great difficulties with aging and others don't. Some people have, you know, other kinds of difficulties, and each one of us deals with what we have to deal with.
Right. Okay.
yeah, let me also say that this teaching is not saying that all there is in your experience is unending torment and suffering. What it's saying is that there's always some anxiety, some suffering there in your experience, to some extent. Sometimes it's really in your face, other times it's quiet little background, but it's there. That there's always some like dissatisfaction. That's what John was talking about. His little, it can be just these little micro doubts and desires and concerns and anxieties that are just part of our experience, and we normally don't pay attention to it.
So why do we have to call it suffering? It's part of a human experience to have doubt, question, to be afraid.
Up to
There
you.
you go. That's the first noble truth.
So go with it. I'm sorry.
Dan actually had raised his hand also. We are kind of running late here, so I don't know what you want to do.
Yeah. Let's, Robert, we mentioned Robert, and then Dan, and then we'll call it quits.
Is there a way to pass through death?
What does that mean?
When a person passes on?
Well, the body dies.
Yes.
There's a whole description of this. This is too big a topic to go into here. There's a description of what happens between death and, if it's going to happen, rebirth. Doesn't have to happen, rebirth. Yeah. And it's a very detailed, this is what the most popular book about this is the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is actually, it's a title that was invented by an Egyptologist in the late 19th century. If you want to make the subject popular, the real book about it is Achieving Liberation in the Space Between, in the Time Between Death and Rebirth. Achieving Liberation is called the Bardo Tutor. But there are other wonderful books about it. And actually, there's a group in Boulder who's going through a terrific book about it written by Francesca Fremantle, an old friend of mine and many others, who worked with Trungpa Rinpoche and co-translated the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And then after he died, she wrote a book about the Book of the Dead called Luminous Emptiness. And I recommend it highly. It's a terrific book. And it's on this big subject.
Thank you. Thank you.
And in fact,
Thank you.
it's possible that this group, we might go through this. I'm wondering about what, whether we're going to continue with the Profound Treasury uninterrupted after we finish volume 1, or perhaps, and I throw it out for your consideration, topics that came to mind are the teachings on death, which are really terrific, very profound, and they're really teachings about life as well. And also then there are the Shambhala teachings, which are very esoteric and beautiful. So something to think about.
Thank you.
Angel sounds interesting.
So, Dan, got something quick?
Quick, yeah, I'll make it quick. I just want to say the whole thing really touched home, but my favorite suffering is the suffering of change. The period in his 3 categories. The period which I think falls into the type of the in the 8 under the period between life and death.
Yeah.
Because it's just, well, on steroids, it's a remarkable model for addiction. Always, you think you know what you want, but then when you get what you want, that's not really what you want because there's something better. There's something more, right? And then even on a lesser thing, like, the moment I, start with my bowl of ice cream or my pint of ice cream or my gallon of ice cream, whatever it is, that's the moment my suffering begins, because it's going to be gone. And it's easier. I have found it's easier for me not to have any ice cream than it is to have a little ice cream. And that's the way I found to avoid that suffering for me.
But what we're being enjoined to do is to simply become aware of all these little flickerings of suffering, of wishing that things were different, and the way we get lost in them, because we normally, we just do it, and we're hardly even noticing it from morning till night. Yeah. Okay, friends, let's close with the dedication of merit if we can. Here we go.
Do you want mute or cacophony?
Cacophony or mute? What do you want? Everybody.
Cacophony.
Cacophony. Yes.
Okay, cacophony, here we go.
Everyone unmute yourself. There we go.
By this merit,
all pain,
Nomination,
made defeat, wrongdoing, stormy waves, sickness and death, stormy waves, the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, Italy, garden of the Rigman's wisdom bloom, dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
That was wonderful. Thank you all.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a thorough start.
There's discussion tomorrow,
Thank you.
right?
Oh, discussion Wednesday.
Discussion Wednesday, right.
Cool.
Thank you.
Night.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Night.
Good night.
Night. Good night. Good night. Oops.
I'm gonna look into that book, John. Luminous Emptiness and the Book of the Dead.
Yeah, I think you'll like that. It's quite good. And if you